Wes Yee. Am I too loud? Feels very loud. Thank you. I'm the VP of Marketing at Sequoia Consulting Group. So thank you all so much for coming. Really want to emphasize, these events are just such a great way for us to connect with the community, for all of you to connect with each other, for us to discuss important topics like this. And just want to thank all of you, because without people showing up, it would be pretty lame for the 5 of us to be up here talking to an empty room. So thank you. Also want to thank Weebly. An amazing space, as you guys can all see. I know I'm jealous. So thank you to their team for having us here and for helping us host. Before we get started, I want to just kind of outline the rest of the evening. Obviously, you've had some food, hopefully the drinks. You guys can continue to grab that stuff as we talk. It's very casual. We are going to go for about 45 to 50 minutes. And then we're going to take Q&A at the end. If you have a pressing need to grill one of us in the middle of it, you can certainly leap out of your chair, run up here, and snatch the mic out of my hand. But otherwise, we'll do it towards the end. Did I miss anything obvious? I don't think so. So without further ado, I'm just going to go and give a quick introduction. And then I think what we'll do is kind of do some icebreaker questions so that you guys can get to know some of the panelists up here. And then we'll get really into it. So first, on my left, we have Mai Ton, the head of HR for OneLogin. And then we have Elizabeth from Everwise. Divya from GoodData. And Ed from Indeed.com. Thank you guys all for being here. We'll do our mic game, so I won't make you all talk at the same time. But first, I want to do a couple icebreakers, like I mentioned, and if we could just start with your favorite movie. Let's start on the end.
I'm going to go with Rocky.
I'm going to go with Jerry Maguire.
So I will say Steel Magnolias, which is a movie I watched with my mom, who is actually here, making this a family affair tonight.
And for me, it's Zootopia, because I have Emma, my 8-year-old daughter, here as well, for diversity's sake.
Stand up and wave to everybody, Emma. Our youngest attendee in Sequoia history. Great. And then our next icebreaker question, what is your favorite inspirational talk? I think one of the things I like to do for people at these events is kind of give some takeaways, give some resources for people. And I think that tells you a lot. It's what talks, or whether it's a TED Talk or it's a podcast interview, have you found to be particularly inspiring to you?
I was going to say it's a TED Talk, Brene Brown, the talk, The Power of Vulnerability. And I was lucky enough to actually see her live too. She spoke at a conference that we had, Indeed Interactive, a few months ago. So it was great.
Before I answer that, and actually the answer to that is my team at GoodData, and they are here. A big shout out to them. They inspire me to do my best work. So thank you, team. And I would say, in terms of the talks, I would say it's Simon Sinek's How Great Leaders Inspire Action. And it's a very, very simplistic way of looking at how companies like Apple or inventors like Wright brothers distinguish themselves, because they focused on the why versus the how or the what.
So I'm going to go a little bit off the beaten path here, because Ed took what I wanted to say, which was Brene Brown. I actually had the opportunity to see Heather Havrilesky speak in San Francisco a few months ago. Some of you may know her as the columnist behind Ask Polly. She has a book that she wrote called How to Be a Person in the World, which is applicable, as you can see from its title, to everyone in the room. But one of the things that she said, which I think relates to what Brene said, was anything that is true in your heart is not a weak position. And that is something I think about a lot as I go about my work and my life.
So I had the pleasure of meeting the new author of the book Feminist Fight Club. And how many of you have seen the movie Fight Club? Like almost all of you? Okay. Well, the first rule of Feminist Fight Club is you talk about it. So we're here to talk about it.
Nice, I love it. All right, let's kind of get into the topic. And I think what I'd like is a two-parter. And I'll start with you, Mai. But first, maybe tell us just a little bit about yourself and your role and some of what you have going on. But then tell us what a culture of diversity and inclusion means to you.
So I'm VP of HR at OneLogin, which is a technology company headquartered here in San Francisco. We have about 200 employees, and so I lead the recruiting and HR teams. Diversity is important to me because I am the only female that sits on the executive team. So it's a very lonely table for me sometimes. There's 11 men at the table, and then me, which, you know, I will say that I'm a mere 5 feet, and everybody else is like 6 feet. So I also bring the height, like diversity, into the room. But it's near and dear to me because I look around at them, and I'm trying to bring about more conversations about why it's important and how to make me feel included so that I can trust them and do better work.
How many in the audience have had that experience or have that experience on a regular basis where you are the only blank at the table? Show of hands. Cool. All right, Elizabeth.
I'm glad you asked that question because I was asking myself that as you spoke. What were my experiences around that? My name is Elizabeth, and I work at Everwise. We are a learning and development company that helps other companies develop their people by connecting them with the resources and then the relationships that they need to be successful with where they are in their career. I run Everwise Women, which is our program specifically geared towards helping women who are at the midpoint of their career continue to advance. And one of the reasons that diversity and inclusion is so important to me is that we have found through our programming that helping women build authentic, meaningful relationships with each other, so peers, with mentors, and then with accomplished women executives is really important to helping them see the path for leadership for themselves. So it's part of the work that we do. It certainly is something that we also live at the organization. The company was founded by 3 white men, and they decided to invest in this space. So it's something that we talk about on a daily basis, given the work that we do.
So my name is Divya, and I'm the Chief People Officer for GoodData. It's a data analytics company, and it's at the forefront of a very, very fast-moving, fast-changing field. And to me, diversity is important because I think it's the cornerstone of innovation, and both diversity of thought and diversity of action. And there is no innovation without diversity. So we really need it to almost breathe in Silicon Valley, and where we are, there's such a gap, right? There is so much work to be done. So in addition to my day job, I'm also on the board of directors of a company called Watermark, which is a nonprofit dedicated to promoting women in leadership. And I just started that a few months ago, and there is so much work to be done in this field. So I'm so glad to have the opportunity to do that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ed. I work for Indeed.com. I'm a recruiting leader over there. And if you're not familiar with Indeed, we're a job search site. And over 3,000 people currently. Very much interested, passionate about increasing inclusiveness in the workplace and also just making the world a more inclusive place as well. And for me, when I think about diversity and inclusion and really building that culture, diversity is really about life experiences, perspectives, and that's really who we are. And inclusion is more of the interaction and engagement and really defining how we work. And so for me, it's been about creating an environment that celebrates individuality and celebrates differences, and also at the same time establishing norms, values that allow us to work more inclusively together.
So I want to spin something back at you, Ed. One of the great things about this panel is we have people who are in kind of different roles. And so I'd love to understand what the catalyst was for you in getting this interest in diversity and inclusion, because it's not something that not everyone who works in recruiting has to have a focus in that, or not everyone who works in HR or in leadership training, they don't all have to focus on this. So what was it? Was there a moment for you that kind of created this interest and new focus for you?
And I think it was so previous to Indeed, I was at Yahoo for 4 years, and I think it was eye-opening to, again, be at a table and be the only one person of color there. And so that really ignited that passion to help, only advance underrepresented groups, and more specifically Latinos in the workplace. But for me, it really came down to, again, about just making the workplace more inclusive. I think as both a person of color, but then also too as a manager, that's something I always strive for with the teams that I build.
Divya, what about you?
Yeah, I think very similar to that. We were working when we started at GoodData in the people team. We were really working on our culture and really trying to reflect what got GoodData to this point and how can we make it better and what's our secret sauce that gets us there. And it is really a very open and transparent environment. And we started working on that and reinforcing that. And we realized that there were some incredible women leaders who had grown through the process. And we just realized that there was something about our culture which was really promoting that. And Marlene, who's in my team over here, she sort of started the initiative in the company that was sponsored by our CFO, actually, who's male, which was even better. And we have a dedicated initiative around women in leadership, and we have metrics related to that. So that's where it all started. Yeah.
Elizabeth, any personal anecdotes that have led you down this path?
So a couple. I think the straightforward answer to why I care about diversity and inclusion is that I think that people are fascinating and that we don't spend enough time looking at each other and asking questions like you just did about the personal stories that we have and the experiences that we bring to bear on all that we do, whether it's in the office or outside of the office. Specifically around women's leadership. When I was in college, I was involved in an organization whose mission was to reduce high-risk drinking on campus, which is a great way to make friends, FYI, if you're looking for tips. And one of the things that I was tasked to do in that role was put together a meeting of all of the leaders on campus to talk about ways that they could role model good behavior for the people who followed them. What was interesting was that I called this meeting and looked around and realized that I, at the head of the table running this alcohol task force, was one of the few women leaders at the university level at this point. And I wondered why. And I realized that the conversation that I wanted to have was a slightly different one than what we were having at the table then, but that it was important to look around and ask questions about the way the world is and push ourselves to make it how it is that we want to see it.
I'm going to pause the panel for a second. Can everybody in the audience turn to someone who you haven't spoken to yet tonight and talk about something that you want to learn? And just share an experience, share a question, connect with them on some level about this topic. Let's say 60 seconds. Pretty good. Who raised their hand a moment ago? Raise your hand. Tell me what you learned.
What did I learn? Oh, I learned that my husband, who's joined us, is interested in learning more about what other companies in our little Silicon Valley bubble are doing to promote diversity. Because he only gets to hear about what OneLogin is doing.
Great. Let's get a couple more. Maybe someone towards the back. I saw it. Screen, please.
She said some people talk and some people listen.
All right, one more. Maybe this area up here. Who has? Anybody hear anything exciting? Did they share something you loved?
We discussed that there's not one secret sauce to solving the diversity issue or inclusion issue, and that we'd be happy to learn a lot of little tips tonight that all add up to big impact.
Great. So why don't we do this? Let's get your answer to that question, and then let's do like a lightning round of tips before we move on.
So traditionally, I've worked in HR now for 12 years, and most of my team has been female. And so I look at my team, and I say, we need more growth for each other. My daughter's laughing at me because she knew I was going to cry tonight. But I do. I look at my 8-year-old daughter, and, I think I want the world to change for her generation, too. And it's just, we need to move the needle faster.
All right. Why don't
Can I do a quick question on that
Jump
actually
in,
for a second? So, and that's actually what we talked about in the moment around learning. What do you want to learn? We both said, what else is there that we can do? Because we need to move the needle fast and we feel like it's not. So quick poll for the audience. how long, if we continue advancing women into leadership at current rates, as one example, how long do you think it will take to achieve global gender parity in the workforce? Call out some answers.
A million years.
All right, 1,000,000 years. Anybody more optimistic out there? 50, 120, 75. Anybody want to go like Price is Right, 76? No? Okay. 1,000,001. So 79, which is the average lifespan of an American woman right now. So think about how apt what it is, what you just said really is. Considering the babies that are being born today, we'd have to wait their entire lifetimes to achieve global gender parity in the workplace. We know that's way too long. We also know that's only one facet, right, of diversity, and we have to think about this holistically. But there is some urgency around this, and it's great that all of us are here tonight talking about this issue.
So I see people taking notes, so let's maybe help them fill out some action items. Just go down the line and give a quick tip on something that, these people can go back and take to their teams and have a quick impact.
Sure. So we, I think as I thought about it, we have like a 5-step thing that we followed, when we really boil it down. So the first one is, you have to create an environment where you really emphasize openness. And we did that through doing focus groups and anonymous surveys and, publishing in the whole company the most hairy items and getting leaders to own it. So the second thing you need to do is get leadership engagement and get your leaders to own just 1 or 2 things they're going to do about making the workplace more diverse, more inclusive. The third thing you need to do is enlist the power of champions. So your HR team can go at it alone. You cannot go at it alone, whatever role you're in. And you would be surprised by how many people are passionate about this. So we enlisted champions in the workplace that helped us with our, different initiatives. And then the fourth thing we did was we built a shared vision with our leaders and our champions on actionable items that we would accomplish. And then we built communities, right? And the communities were not just necessarily focused on diversity, but they were focused on things people cared about, like wellness, but essentially get the whole power of community going and get people to talk to each other. And that's when they really open up. They won't open up in a town hall. They won't open up in a formal one-on-one, but you get them involved in communities and you get that the energy of the community going. So those were 5 things that worked for us, and just thought I'd share that with you.
I'm going to riff a little bit off of that. So around diversity champions, one of the things that we're going to start doing at Indeed is actually assessing for that in the interview process. And you're probably thinking, well, how do you do that? So really asking candidates, what they've done to make their team, their organization more inclusive, and really get an understanding if people are passionate, if this is something that they're interested in. Because to your point, it's not just an HR, it's not just a recruitment thing. It's really a whole company. When people ask me, who owns diversity in your company, I usually tell them there's one person that's responsible, but at the same time, all of us are. So I think that's one of the takeaways I would want everybody to leave with tonight. 1, something you could be assessing in your interview process, and then 2, it's everybody's responsibility.
What does it look like in your interview process? Like, what are the actual, is there a list somewhere that you hand your hiring managers or your recruiters that they need to check these boxes as they're going through and trying to fill roles? Or is it just kind of we kind of understand that this is something we need to be thinking about?
Yeah, so our interview process, I would say, is something, for us, it's a test and learn, so we're very early phases, but what we would want to do is just have that as a baseline question in all of our interviews.
Mai?
Yeah, just, to add to that, I think the one tool that we found very helpful is Textio. So every time we are posting a, job, we are taking the job description through the Textio tool, and it actually points out words or language which would be appealing to a, more diverse audience. So that's really helpful. Textio, Textio.
So maybe 3 points from me. The first thing is that I encourage you not to try to boil the ocean. It's a big ocean, and so if you can focus on one thing, for me, I focus on female leadership. And so when I do that, I use data to tell my story of we were 21% female last year in Silicon Valley, which is super representative of like lots of different diversity, people coming from all over the world to live here, but yet we were only like whatever 20% female. So I set a goal of can we move it to 25% for 2016? Sure enough, we did it, and we did it before 2016 ended. So I encourage you to start with one data point and just see and measure and track over time so that you can tell the story of why this is important. So the second data point is find the studies, because there have been a lot of them. McKinsey does them, Great Place to Work Institute does them, but they have found correlations between companies that are successful and the diversity of their teams. The boards and the diversity level at the board level actually has an impact on the business and how well the business does over time. I think Great Place to Work actually discovered that if you took the 100 best companies list in any of the given years, they outperform any other S&P index by 40%. So you've got to start finding that research and giving it to your executive leadership to tell them why it matters, to the Simon Sinek talks, right, of why. And then the third thing is you do have to find the passionate leaders within your company. I will say that we had a chance to meet with Intuit, who has a huge diversity team, a D&I team that's dedicated to this cause. What they found was if you're able to find the executives or the managers that have daughters in their lives, they actually focus on it more. And so that's why Intuit, I mean, you can see, it's not Intuit, sorry, it's Intel. They have a huge emphasis on it because the CEO is trying to change the world for his daughters.
I think one thing you mentioned, I might be cheating because I feel like we've talked about this, but it's really important to just focus on one or two really key goals, because the more you have, the harder it is to repeat it, and the harder it is to get buy-in on 50 goals or 20 goals when you really just have one North Star where you can actually guide decision-making process by, hey, we agreed this is an important goal for us as a company. Let's make our decisions based around that.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to tell you that, we haven't figured this out completely. We've started the dialogue, and I'm happy to say that I'm part of it. I think sometimes it is just bringing about awareness that this one thing matters, and so you can kind of start to build awareness as well as start talking openly about what it is that you want to get and setting that goal for everybody.
Great. Elizabeth, how about a couple tips?
There's so much I want to say. So quickly, some quick tips. One thing I would say, we know that relationship capital is incredibly important to advancing people of all backgrounds in the workplace. So mentor or sponsor somebody in your company. Give them the opportunity to have that visibility with leaders who you know, and provide them with the guidance that they need to be successful when you hand them those opportunities. The other thing I'd say, moving away a little bit from the organizational piece, somebody over here said there is no secret sauce, and to be sure, there is structural change that we need, organizational change, there's a lot that we have to do, but at Everwise, we do actually think that there's a secret ingredient towards creating some of this change. We think that's empathy, because empathy is what is the key to creating authentic, meaningful relationships, and when you build meaningful relationships, you engage social learning, which tends to be much more impactful than other kinds of learning. So quickly around empathy, people tend to construe empathy as walking in somebody else's shoes, but I think especially when we talk about diversity and inclusion, we need to be careful to use that frame, because the reality is that we all have our own experiences in the workplace and we all have our own backgrounds. We may not really appreciate the experience of somebody else or really understand it. So I like to think of empathy as emotion matching rather than situation matching, because while situations may be different, human emotion is universal. So if you think about connecting empathically with people in your company, you can also do this in your personal lives as well. Try to identify what the emotion is of the other person. Recall a time when you felt that way, and then play out what it is that you needed in that moment. Let that guide how you respond to the other person, rather than immediately saying, I get what they're going through, or I've been there too. Try to make that connection and use that to guide the response.
Great. I want to do another mini intermission. So if you could find somebody else that you haven't talked to and share a tip or a learning, something that you think that they could find valuable. I'll give you maybe 120 seconds this time.
One tip that I shared, and I guess you could share the tip that we had, was getting leadership to be vocal about the importance of diversity and inclusion. We're an 8-person startup, but it makes a huge difference that the CEO says, this is something that's important. How do we figure this out to the team? And I just think him being a champion for that sets a tone for the rest of us.
What's the key to actually getting your CEO to do something and buy in?
I mean, I'm bigger than he is. Actually, it's very similar to what you mentioned. He has 2 daughters, and that's something that's important to me in terms of all the different classes of folks that we want to have feel included in the organization. But saying, think about the world. As you were saying, think about the world you want your daughters to grow up in. We don't even know what jobs they'll have, in 20 years because they don't exist right now. So how do we create these environments because the people essentially be the same?
So empathy really is find something that they care about and draw them. Let's take one more. Right here.
The biggest question I have is, this conversation is a conversation that people are having that want to have the conversation. But the biggest problem is where people aren't having the conversation or don't want to have the conversation. And I work for a behemoth business, and it's really how to impact change when there's so much bureaucracy, because it inhibits our ability to make quick decisions that really impact the bottom line, but in general impact everything from what it's like to come to work every day to who's going to work with us and how much turnover we have.
So how to get through bureaucracy and impact change at a behemoth. I think that's actually a good segue to our next topic. I think we kind of skipped ahead and got into some tips and got really actionable and tactical. One thing that I think can maybe help you and other people who are dealing with getting buy-in is really illustrating the case. And I know there's lots of research that probably all of us have seen, but I'd love to know, some of your experiences. What have been the things that you key on, whether it's highlighting the risks if we fail at this for our businesses, or the benefits. If we get this right, there is a tangible benefit. And I know there's a lot of research, and I know you guys all have some insights into that. I would love to know what were the key points that you highlight, or would you recommend that people highlight as they go to make these cases to get buy-in and get people on board? You want to start here?
It's a very tough question to tackle, right? Like, where do you start and how do you really do this? So I think that, OneLogin, I'll share a story. OneLogin, we had an engineer named Isis Anshali, and she was, a very attractive young woman, and we had decided to do a recruiting campaign where you wrap the BART and Muni stations underground with all of your advertisements. They call it station domination. So we did that. We used and featured our own employees with their own quotes of why they enjoy working at OneLogin. And what happened was we featured 4 different people, and nobody really paid attention to any of the guys. They paid attention to Isis because Isis was attractive, and they said, what? Her social media feed blew up because they thought that she was from a modeling agency. So they said, what, she's not really an engineer, she's a model. So what modeling agency was it? And they made fun of the shadow of her arms and how slim they were. And so it was just a big realization for the company that, nobody has to look the part. And it brought us international exposure. It put sort of our company on the radar and the map of diversity. And it was only because Isis fought back to say she created a hashtag campaign that was called hashtag I look like an engineer. And it went viral because you don't have to really look like anybody to make an impact in what you do every day and an impact on the world. So I think that you can find stories like this, and we were just lucky enough to have her, that you can find stories like this all over the place so that it starts to put that attention in your company. Because what we found was, as a result of that hashtag I look like an engineer campaign, we saw an uptick in the number of diverse candidates that were applying to our company. We saw an uptick in the number of women. I think it was like up by 25 percentage points. And so it made a huge difference, and that's why we were able to show the data that said, you know, this is like the start of something. We should definitely capitalize on this. And so we haven't stopped talking about it, and it's been at least a year now since that campaign ran.
I'll expose myself as the marketer on the panel, but I mean, brand value, brand cachet, you know, people talk about the cool companies to work for, and this is a topic that makes a company attractive for candidates. It is, you know, people want to work at places like this, and I think that that business case is real.
The business case is real, very true. There is robust quantifiable data that shows that companies that have more diverse and inclusive teams are more agile, they're more innovative, they're higher performing. I think that case is pretty clear. The challenge is putting it in terms that people understand, and I do think that stories help with that. I also think that what helps is, and this, some people have more challenges with than others, depending on your organization, whether you can get data about your organization, because leaders love to learn about their people. So as part of the program that we run, Everwise Women, we collect information about all of the women who come into our program. They're from a variety of different companies. We aggregate the data, and then we're able to show for the 200 women who've gone through the program so far, there is an ambition waterfall. They are ambitious at a very high level. They aspire to senior leadership at a high level. And then guess what? You ask how many believe they will achieve senior leadership, and the number goes in half. What's been fascinating for us is that we take this data, we can't give company-specific data because it's small n there, but we go talk to companies and they're fascinated by it, and they want to understand what's happening, and they want to know what they can do better. So part of it is about drawing the case more broadly, part of it is about telling the story, and then part of it is about bringing it back to your organization, whether it's through stories that tie it directly there or data that you can present.
So for us, the business case actually had nothing to do with me. It was what happened in the company before I got there. And there was no focus on people or culture or diversity or any of that. And the company was really in a state where they felt they actually were feeling the impact on the business and how much it was holding back the people and the business. And that was actually one of the reasons I joined the company, because I felt that they really got it. Like, I didn't want them to suffer and then, you know, I come in, but they were really suffering. And I felt that they were at a place that they really wanted to partner. So from our CEO to even, you know, I met with a couple of the board members in that process. And I took that as, you know, a really advantageous starting point to say, okay, if you want to do this, it's not going to happen overnight. You have to commit yourself to at least 2 years, and these are the things that we need you to do. And not just the CEO, but the whole leadership team and the board. And I said, every quarter, I'm going to come back to you and we're going to measure progress. But there has to be, you know, certain things that you will absolutely commit to doing. And I think that's why, you know, the whole People Ops team at GoodData was, you know, very, very energized because, or I think they didn't sleep for the first year. We had so much fun building out all those programs. But I think the only takeaway I would give from this is if you realize that you have, you know, a sponsor or a partner who's realized the business case, take full advantage of it, because it's something you can build on and, you know, hopefully leave behind work for your teams and the organization around you for years to come. So I think that really, really gave us momentum, and, you know, we absolutely seized that momentum.
Yeah, the business case for us is having 180 million monthly active users and being in over 60 countries. We don't want to alienate our own users, and so our employee base needs to be reflective of our user base. And so there's the revenue impacting the innovation, which has been mentioned up here, and really that's been a kind of the pillar, the anchor for us in getting to move and to have change. So revenue impacting and really try not to alienate our users as well.
So, we did a similar panel to this in New York in the spring, and some of the feedback that I got, and I think it's natural because of almost who we choose to have on the panels, which is in its own way a form of diversity and inclusion, is that we really focus a lot, probably as an industry, on women and on racial differences, but there are also some others that I don't think we talk enough about, and I want to just mention whether it's sexuality or it's age. There are other things, and I'd love to get just some comments on how we can make sure that, hey, if we're going to focus on women, we're not going to leave behind these other important groups that are dealing with many of the same issues. There are situations where they're the only one at the table of their age or of their sexuality or of their insert choice here, and so how do we make sure that we don't miss the forest for the trees? What are some things that you guys have seen work well, whether it's in your organizations or outside?
So I will go. For our ages, so what we do, I'm a big fan of pivot tables, so I pivot the heck out of the data that we have. So what we discovered is that I think it was 68% of our population is either Generation X or Generation Y. And then we had probably a smattering of baby boomers. And what the executive team and I realized is that most of our programs and most of the tools that we use at work, most of our benefits are geared toward Generation X, Generation Y. And what we're starting to discuss, it's very infant stages, but is sort of the notion that we need to start taking care of our elderly parents, because the baby boomers are in this generation where they're starting to take care of their elderly parents, who some of them might be ill. And so we're looking at sort of like, what do we do for long-term care so that our baby boomers can kind of rest assured that they're being taken care of in terms of the benefits. So that's one of the things that we're starting to look at, because each generation has very different needs. And so I think that it's true, and then we're guilty of spending too much time focused on whatever the 68% population that we have, Generation X and Generation Y, and every once in a while we do turn our attention to the other segments of the population that we have. So, like I said, we haven't figured everything out. Like, it's multi-pronged and kind of multifaceted, interesting space to be in, but I think we're making strides to talk about things out loud together.
I think that's a great point. When we talk about diversity, we should be sure to talk about it holistically and talk about the fact that many of us have all different kinds of identities that we bring to work. I was really struck by a statistic that I read the other day. Did you know that there's only one openly gay CEO in the Fortune 500? We talk a lot about how few women there are, which is true, but there's one openly gay CEO, and we don't talk about that as much. We also don't talk about the race statistics around that as well. But I think, to your point, a lot of it is being open about the conversation and recognizing that we have to have a conversation that's wider. I think some of it is about being open ourselves about who we are at work, and this means creating that inclusive environment that we've been talking about. I've had the experience everywhere I've worked until my current company of being the only openly gay person. And what's been really crazy about my current company is that there are three of us, three gay women, and it's the only time that's ever happened to any of us. And we at first were very struck by it and couldn't believe it, but what's been amazing is that that has actually inspired some other members of the team to come out as well. Not to say that that will happen at all of your organizations, but I think that just goes to the point that we talk about this, and there's data and there's statistics, but a lot of it also means that we have to live it as who we are. The one other thing I wanted to mention around the diversity piece and including age is that we have seen some very successful reverse mentoring programs tackle this exact issue. So there are more experienced people in the workforce who can find it helpful to learn from the more junior people who may have better technical skills or a different worldview. And then that's an opportunity for the more junior people to gain sponsorship and visibility in the organization. So it's really a win-win for both sides there.
I think, Wes, to your point, diversity cannot be just for diversity's sake, right? And I think it should be more about diversity of thought right, and diversity of action. And before GoodData, I was at Cisco for a long time and worked with several engineering teams. And at that point, we had 27,000 strong engineering teams, and we had 6 women VPs. And I was in the midst of the absolute promotion of this one woman engineer VP who was really incompetent. And there were some people who wanted to promote her and put her in a very critical role because she was a woman. And I thought that was an insult to women. And that is not what diversity should be about. And I said we should not do it just because she's a woman. I think there are several opportunities in the company where we would, gain from her expertise, but we shouldn't, we should absolutely, promote for the, absolutely, for critical roles, it should be absolutely merit-based. We should create more and more opportunities for women. We should, make sure that our recruiting pools are wider enough. We create an environment where they naturally thrive. So I do think at some point we need to take that, check that we're not doing it for, just promoting, somebody just because. I mean, it's the reverse thing then, So just brought back memory.
I think one community or a group that does get overlooked very much is people with a disability. So there's over 1 billion people in the world with a form of disability, both visible and non-visible. And so what I've seen have worked in some of the other organizations that I've worked in is creating a support group, a network that would allow employees to really come together and share their story and to build empathy with each other. Either personally have a form of a disability or have a loved one that they're caring for that does. And so again, I think that's one community, one group that does get kind of lost in this conversation.
I think that's a really good point, and I'll just share something from my experience actually at Sequoia that I think really highlights your point earlier and kind of what you talked about the importance of empathy across whatever diverse groups you're trying to empower. One thing that we do at Sequoia is we kind of, it's a little, I found it to be a little cheesy when I joined, but when we have meetings, we start off with some focus on a thought or something very personal. And actually, in the first 2 weeks of joining the company, I was at our management offsite, and it started not with a business focus or goal, how many clients we need to get, how much revenue. It had nothing to do with that. And the first question was, what is something about your childhood that's impacted who you are today? And in my head, I'm like, oh, well, I'm the new guy. I got to tell a cool story about how I was a great baseball player at 12, and it'll make me look like just this great new hire and whatever. And right off the bat, one of our most senior leaders shared a story about how he had his mother grew up with depression. And he talked about how that had impacted him and changed how he is as a leader today. And immediately my stupid story went out the window, and I started to think about something really personal to share. And as we went around the room, 30 some odd managers, many who've been with the company over a decade, it really created a bond between us that I haven't had with people that I've worked for many years. Even friends that people I've known for 10 years of my life. I knew more about these new people that I just met because of facilitating this very intentional exchange of an empathetic experience. And I think having pieces like that as a part of your regular business practice can really create some of the connection that is actually very hard to get if you aren't intentional about it. Before we go to, I do have one more question that I kind of want to end on a high note. I want to stop for just one more minute. I've talked about how this is as much about the topic as it is about community, and I think this is a really rich opportunity for people here to connect with each other, lean on each other, find out what's working, what's not working, and get support from other peers in the industry. So I'd like to pause for just a minute and you can pick someone who you've already talked to, exchange contact information, whether it's a business card or maybe that's too old school and you can just pull up your LinkedIn app. Find someone that you've talked to that's interesting, that seems interesting, that looks interesting, that could offer a different perspective that you can connect with and come away with this with not just some great tips and actionable items, but a new relationship with somebody that you could who knows where it may lead, but I think that's for me, when I go out to events and network with people, that's the thing that I take back, and really, I can see a lot of faces out here, people that I've interacted with multiple times, and that's, I think, the real value you can get. So let's just take a couple minutes to do that. But I kind of want to end on a note of of inspiration. I think you all probably have many stories, and we've heard some already about success in this area. And I would love to hear just one more, success story. Really, just a case study of a time, whether it's your experience or one you've heard of that kind of gives you energy. Because I think that's, I know, going to help a lot of the people in the audience as they leave here. Anybody can go first. I'm not going to pick.
I can do a quick one. So I think as a result of our Women in Leadership program, I'm just so thrilled and so inspired and energized by the women at GoodData. And we were looking at data, and 47% of our directors are women. And, and if you see the stories of each of those women, they've probably been at GoodData between 2 to 4 years, and each of them has taken on such an incredible role and made so much of impact. It's it's something I'll carry with me the rest of my life. Yeah.
I'll go next. So just this past summer, we had the Girls Who Code. It was a summer immersion program. We invited 20 students from 10th and 11th grade to come to our Austin headquarters and spend 7 weeks with us. So the students learned computer science fundamentals, from robotics to how to build a web page, and also had dedicated mentors when they weren't actually in the classroom. And so it was just very inspirational to see the engagement, to see the excitement in their eyes, especially on graduation day. So we're excited to potentially do that again sometime in the future, but definitely a great success story for us at Indeed just this past summer.
I'd like to share a story from one of the groups of women that we have going through our program right now. I've talked a lot about the power of social learning and relationships, so I want to share a story about where we saw that in action. We had the women coming together to hear a speaker, a woman who had been very successful in her career, and that was a great experience. But what was amazing to me is the conversation that happened afterwards. One woman shared that she had gone to her boss for a raise because she had found the salary of her predecessor, and it was higher. So she thought she had the information she needed to go advocate for a raise for herself. She went, took the raise to the boss took it up to the CEO said no, came back down, no. So she shared this with the group, just in conversation, wasn't a structured thing, shared it, and another woman said to her, all right, here's what I did. I had this similar conversation with my boss, but the way that I framed it was, I don't want to go out and have to look for another offer, because by the time I'm asking for that or have the other offer, I'm out the door. So what I would think you should do is go back, have a conversation, right? Now, look, there's some there that has to be careful around the organization and where you are. But what was amazing was that in this exchange, we had a back and forth around one woman sharing her experience, another woman sharing her experience, and saying, here's something that could be helpful to you. The rest of us in the room asked when she had last had the conversation with her boss, and it turned out that it had been a year ago. A year previously. So I think that's the important piece here, that she'd had this conversation, she'd accepted the answer, she'd been waiting a year, and then she'd made this connection with somebody else in the program who had offered her a strategy that she could employ. That's the kind of learning that we see being so effective in the programs that we run, and that's something that you can all gain from the community that we're building here together.
I'm gonna piggyback on that real quick, because I love the way that was framed. I think one thing that can be valuable when going through that sort of thing, whether it's about salary or getting buy-in on an initiative, it's creating an ally. And so if you can go to a person and say, if you want more money, and say, how can I provide enough value on top of what I'm already delivering to get to this point where it's a no-brainer for you to give me this raise, buy in on this initiative, whatever it might be. And then you're siding with that person and not creating an adversarial relationship, which some people will take it as when you have a tough conversation like that. And so if you're able to create allies, is look for opportunities, because they might be your boss, they might be your manager, they might be your boss's boss, but it's another person. And so if you can create that empathy, I think that's a word that I know I'll come away from this conversation with them, and connect on a personal level and align your goals. I think it'll really help.
So along that same note, so I joined OneLogin in the summer of 2015, and I spent my first probably 6 months trying to really understand the CEO, what he cared about, and so I sat down with him and talked about not only the business, but the things that motivated him and sort of what kept him up at night. It took me probably 8 months to gain his trust, so that now when I talk about diversity and inclusion, he actually listens. And I have seen him kind of pick up on things and call out some of our executive or fellow executive members to call them out when they're doing something that's perhaps inappropriate. So I will just say that it takes a lot of persistence, but I do agree that if you can find the right ally, and for me, I'm lucky enough to work directly with the CEO, but like if you can, tone starts from the top. So if you can get to the CEO and connect on a level that doesn't have to deal with business, and that he understands that you're in it to help the company grow and get better, you'll find that once you break down that barrier, he'll listen to you and he or she will understand you better. And so I think that's sort of my takeaway throughout this whole journey is if you can really understand what motivates your senior leaders, you can start having these conversations that really matter and move the needle further, faster, quicker.
Thank you guys for sharing those stories. I do want to take some questions from the audience. To add a little guidance, if you have a question that is very specific to you and your situation and your business, maybe hold that. We will have time. People will stick around and you can come up and talk to them. What I'd love to do is get sort of the type of questions that maybe apply to the general audience and things that, maybe get out a story that somebody talked about or an experience and kind of make that as inclusive as of the entire audience as you can. And I think Camille has a microphone so we can not have people forced to yell. So if we can just get a hand raise, I think right here, we'll start here and then we'll go to the back over there.
So how many job recs does each of your company have open for, the next year? I'm just wondering, so as part of this, obviously there's a conversation of recruitment marketing, and these conversations are intentional so that you bring people into your company as well as build a conversation. So, how many roles are you looking to fill in your organization?
That's a quick one. I know, I know you're asking me, but we're hiring a lot, so if you're interested, please talk to me.
We've just now started this planning stages of 2017 budgeting, and I can tell you that in our forecast we have about 100 new hires coming in. So it's a massive growth curve for somebody like us who is at 200 people right now. So lots going on, lots to do. So for sure, look us up.
We're growing too. I can't tell you exact numbers, but look at our website and there are some fun roles there.
So for the rest of this year, we have about 30 positions that we will add, and we haven't completed our planning for next year.
We have a tremendous amount of hiring still to go for the remainder of the year, and we're also going through 2017 planning. But you go to Indeed.jobs, and we have over 400 jobs posted worldwide. We do have an office in San Francisco. Lindsay Brothers is one of our product managers. Hi, Lindsay.
It's a very nice office. I've been there.
Nice. So if you're interested, grab me or Lindsay after, and we'll let you know what type of opportunities are open.
I saw a hand in the back.
This is actually partially more of a tip when you ask for ways to get in the door earlier and get management interested in this. And so I'll make it sort of a question, but I wonder if any of you have found this. One of the things I have found, I don't know how many of you are in high-tech companies, but probably I'll guess a big percent. One of the most difficult things is hiring and recruiting. And one of the ways I've been able to get the attention of senior management is by helping them understand that diversity hiring will expand the pool of available resources. And the minute you talk about making recruiting easier, broader, that sort of thing, then their ears just perk up because you're really talking about a business perspective from this. And by adding recruiting aspects where you're really looking for and actively pursuing people with disabilities or people of other races or women for non-traditional roles, it really can make a difference in your hiring pool.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I'll get her right here.
Oh, so my question is, how do you feel about name blind applications?
Honestly, we have not tried it yet. So I don't have a lot of data to share with you, but I will say that one of the things that I'm looking to do is that whenever we have a role, I'm working with our recruiters to say, you know what, bring in diverse candidates. Like, it's our responsibility to make that pipeline broader and, to your point, just like open the doors. But we haven't used that specific technology to make them blind yet.
How many people in the audience have tried something like that? Show of hands. Not a lot. And those who did raise their hands, is it what's been the? I see head nodding. It's been a positive.
So there's so many other biases though that can also, so removing a name, I think there's been some studies that actually have showed some positive results, but somebody's location, socioeconomic status, the school they went to, the company they worked for, there's so many biases that can play into how a hiring manager, how a recruiter actually reviews the qualifications of their perception that they form just based off what they see on somebody's resume. So I think maybe the evolution of where the industry should go is more merit-based. I think we were talking, Elizabeth and I, a little bit about a couple of tools. I'm not going to steal your thunder. But I think that's where the industry as a whole needs to go. Now, I don't think we should dehumanize that process, but there may be some technology, some software that can help improve or remove some of those biases that do come up.
Good transition there. We were talking about a company called Unitive that is working to remove unconscious biasing from the hiring process by giving you a platform, a tool that you can use to be very specific about what skills you're looking for each open job that you have, and then take the resumes that you get from candidates and map skills, education, experiences into different buckets, have you evaluate all the skills at the same time, all the educational experiences at the same time, and then spits out, okay, here are the assessments that you made, not knowing what was attached to what, and here are the top candidates. So if you're interested, you can check that out, Unitive.
Maybe one more, right here.
Yeah, so kind of related to that, our recruiting team is doing a really good job of creating a really diverse candidate pool. We have a diverse pipeline. However, a problem that we're seeing is that the people who are being hired, it's not very diverse at all. And so a little bit to piggyback on what the tool you were talking about, is there anything else that you guys have seen that's been successful in kind of implementing that, of training the interviewers themselves? Because it's not at our recruiting level, it's beyond that.
I have two things to share maybe. One is a new company. It's in beta phases, but it's called character.io. And what they do is they take the role to understand what character traits you need to have for this role. And what that does is it doesn't just necessarily eliminate the bias, but it starts off with everybody understanding what character traits you're looking for, because the salesperson is very different from a product person, is very different from an engineer. So I think that's one of the things that we're starting to experiment with. And the second thing, I'm losing my memory, so maybe it'll come to me in a minute, but that's one of the things that we found.
I think just listening to you, there may be an opportunity to mix up the hiring manager pool and some opportunity to have a dialogue with leadership and, really investigate what's going on and, are they really behind it? Do they really see the value of, opening up the diversity and the, mix of employees at work? And if you know of any advocates of people who really believe in that, getting them to participate in the interviewing panel and interviewing pool. But I think the conversations at the leadership level will go a long way, because it looks like you're doing the right thing, but you're coming up with the same result, right? So there's something almost at the cultural level that you may have an opportunity to dig into, yeah.
Sorry, it's been a long day. Paradigm. It's a company founded by Noelle Emerson, and she was previously a litigation attorney working on women's rights. We brought them in and did unconscious bias training, and this was also over a year ago, and our managers still talk about it because in the back of their minds, I think they still think about like, what am I committing? Like, what am I seeing that I shouldn't be seeing? And so I think partnering with resources like that will actually help drive your organization forward too.
Wonderful. I'm just going to do a little housekeeping. So you probably will have in your inbox in the next 30 minutes an email from me. I've been up here writing emails during this whole panel. I'm not paying attention. That asks you for your feedback. And we like doing these things. I think it's a real value to this community. I get a lot out of it, selfishly. But we want to know what topics you're interested in. We'd love to get your feedback on this topic, on this event. If you are a great speaker and would love to be on a panel like this, I would definitely want to connect with you. And if you have a cool space, we're always looking for more places to share with our community. I want to thank all of you for coming. I think this is a really, really important topic, and I'm glad to see people come and feel passionately about that. Can we get a round of applause for our speakers? Thank you, guys. And like I mentioned, we still have some food, we still have some drinks. Hang out, connect with other people here. Come up and talk to our wonderful speakers. We did record the session. I'll share that as soon as our creative director gets around to editing it. But once again, just thank you guys. And thank you to Weebly for hosting us and being so wonderful.
I also want to say a big thank you to Wes for his amazing questions and the interactive nature of this whole event. And this is the second event we are doing, and we loved.
Yes.
Mai and I were there. We loved it. So thank you, Wes.
Yeah,
and a big
we
thank
love
you to
Wes.
Sequoia. Yeah.